Director Calandri?
Yes.
Director Urosic?
Here.
Director McLaren?
I don't see her name on the list, Patty.
How about alternate Martin?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Great, thank you, Angelica.
You're
I'm going to go ahead and put you as present. Director
Yes.
Paris?
Here.
So we'll see if Kathy chimes in anytime soon. But we have Angelica here until then.
She can't be.
Oh, she's a landowner.
Yeah,
That's right.
Let me call Kathy real. Patty.
It's Barbara.
Patty, this is James. I have Barbara.
Okay, so Barbara?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, Barbara is the alternate.
I apologize for that, Angelica.
No.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yes, we can,
Okay, we
Kathy.
hear Kathy now. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, then Phyllis Stannon,
I'm here.
Kate White,
Here.
and Craig Parton.
Here.
We also have present Matt Knudsen and Pete Thompson.
Thank you, Patty. That brings us to item 3, adoption of the agenda. Is there a motion to adopt the agenda?
This is Adam. I move that we adopt the agenda.
Motion made by Adam. Is there a second?
Second.
And can you say your name when you second, please?
Brandon Clandry.
Second by Brandon. Is there any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all in favor of the motion to adopt the agenda by roll call vote?
Director McLaren,
Yes.
Director Ricci,
Yes.
Director Calandri,
Yes.
Director Urosic,
Yes.
and Director Paris.
Yes, motion's carried unanimously. We're now on public comments. Are there any public comments? Patty, anybody in the boardroom requesting to speak?
Anybody raising their hand? Nope.
Okay. And anybody online wanting to speak, you can unmute for a moment. I do not see anyone. Okay, we'll move on to item 5. There are no special presentations. That brings us to item 6. We're on the consent agenda. And consent agenda items A, B, C, D, and E. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
This is Adam. I move that we approve the consent calendar agenda.
This is Derek. I'll second.
Motion made by Adam, second by Derek to approve the consent agenda. And just so everyone knows, on the agenda, it is correct. Items A, B, C, D, and E. On the screen, it's showing an F. That's supposed to be E. Just for clarification, is there any discussion regarding the motion to approve the consent agenda? Hearing no discussion, all in favor of the motion to approve the consent agenda by roll call vote?
Director McLaren,
Yeah.
Director Ricci,
Yes.
Director Calandri,
Yes.
Director Urosic,
Yes.
and Director Paris.
Yes, motion's carried unanimously. That brings us to the advisory committee. Any presentation by the advisory committee?
Mr. Chairman, this is James, and we have no presentation. We met last Wednesday to discuss the items, and the memo speaks for itself.
Great. Thank you very much, James.
Thank you.
Any questions of the advisory committee? Hearing none, we'll move on to item number 8, administrative committee report. Matt or Pete?
Yes, good morning. This is Matt. So since our last Watermaster board meeting, the administrative committee made up of directors Urosic and Ariki met with the admin staff on 2 different occasions. One time on September 16th, we met, and the focus of that meeting was to go through the proposed Hallmark consulting services agreement being considered today on at this board meeting. We also went through the scope of work associated with that agreement, the estimated fee schedule, and also discussed the proposed amendment number 1 that we're also going to discuss today. The committee also met secondly on September 23rd. Again, we went through the Hallmark agreement, discussed some of the comments made by the advisory committee, and then we went through our normal business, going through the agenda for today, and spent some time focused on the payment of the bills that was just approved. So that's all I have to report, unless the committee members would like to add anything to that.
Derek or Adam, anything to add?
Nope, he covered it well.
Great. Derek, you good?
No, sir. I'm good. Yes, sir. No problem.
Yeah. I'm going to say I'm sorry, but we probably don't need to talk about it now. Okay. Thank you. We're on item 9, consideration possible action, certify the 2022 delinquent assessment list, and that's going to be Matt or Pete.
Yes, good morning again. This is Matt. So on page 30 of your agenda packet is the September 21st, 2022 delinquent assessment list. And just a reminder, we've done this every year with the Watermaster. Per the rules and regulations on page 43 of the rules and regs, it requires that the Watermaster prepare and present for certification at their September board meeting a list of all past due assessments. So that's what the 3-page list includes. If you'd like, I could give you a quick summary of what makes up the total amount. About $51,000 is made up of overlying production rights from Exhibit 4, past due assessments. About $29,000 is made up of producers with return flow credits. About $371,000 is made up of small pumpers over pumping. $670,000 is for new production and enforcement. Of that $670,000, about $105,000 we have payment settlement agreements with those folks. About $4,000 for supporting landowners, $25 from the state of California, and about $13,000 from the federal government for Edwards Air Force Base. So that's a summary of what makes up the roughly $1.1 million in past due assessments. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions, but we're looking for a motion to certify the delinquent list.
Are there any questions of Matt? Is there a motion to certify the delinquent assessment list for 2022?
This is Derek. I will make that motion.
Motion made by Derek. Is there a second?
Adam, second.
Second by Adam. Is there any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all in favor of the motion to certify the delinquent assessment list for 2022 by roll call vote?
Director McLaren,
Yes.
Director Ariki,
Yes.
Director Calandri,
Yes.
Director Urasic,
Yes.
Director Paris.
Yes, motion's carried unanimously. That brings us to item 10, consideration possible action on new production applications. That's going to be Phyllis or Kate or someone else.
Hi, good morning. I'm Arden with Todd Groundwater, and I'll be going through the new production application. So we just have, thanks. We just have one for this week. It's for Augustine and Gloria Lopez. And this is a pretty straightforward application. It's for 1.5 acre-feet per year. And this is page 34 of the packet. And the letter within the PDF is beginning on page 39. And so they're wanting to build a single family home in the southeastern sub-area. And they're going to have a little bit of irrigation, but it's drought-resistant flowers and plants, and also some shade trees. And so we have the map of that on page 40 of the PDF. And so due to the low amount of water, 1.5 acre feet per year, and the obligation to pay the replacement water assessment, Todd Groundwater considers the material injury as defined in the judgment to be negligible. And the advisory committee reviewed this and they recommended approval. There were 10 yeses and 1 person abstained.
Thank you, Arden. Any questions of Arden?
Nope.
Okay, hearing none, is there a motion to approve resolution R2256 to approve the new production application?
This is Adam. I move that we approve resolution number R22-56.
Motion made by Adam, is there a second?
This is Brandon, I'll second.
Second by Brandon, is there any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all in favor of the motion to approve resolution R2256 by roll call vote?
Director McLaren,
Yes.
Director Ariki,
Yes.
Director Calandri,
Yes.
Director Urasic,
Yes.
Director Paris.
Yes, motion's carried unanimously. That brings us to item 11, consideration of possible action on transfer application. And again, this will be our engineer.
Great, thank you. So this transfer is it's a one-time transfer of 60 acre feet of carryover water from Sahara Nursery and Farm to RTS Orchards. And so this is on page 61 of the packet, and the letter for this is within the PDF on page 66. And so Sahara Nursery and Farm, they're on the eastern side of the Central Antelope Subbasin. And they have a production rate of 22 acre feet per year. And over the last few years, they've been using a little less than that. They've gone between 6.5 acre feet per year and 17 acre feet per year. And then RTS Orchards, we've seen a few transfer applications with them. They're in the West Antelope Subbasin, and they're near the West Side Water Bank. And so if y'all remember, RTS has been receiving quite a few third-party transfers because they're wanting to continue their current production rates, which are about 1,450 acre feet per year. But especially with ramp down, they've got a bit less than that of their annual production rate. So that is 808 acre feet per year. And they've been clear that they do not intend to increase their annual pumping rate, but they're acquiring the transfers so that they can continue pumping at this rate. So on page 67 of the PDF, we have a table that's outlining these recent one-time transfers. And they've currently had 5,373 acre feet in one-time transfers. And on page 70 of the PDF, we have a map that's showing the locations of each of the properties and hydrographs for nearby monitoring wells. And I just want to call attention to that the hydrographs near RTS show that the water levels have been increasing over the past 15 years because they're so close to the water bank. So they're receiving a lot of recharge associated with the water bank. And then Sahara Nursery is in the Central Antelope Subbasin. And in recent years, their water levels have been relatively stable. So they haven't been increasing in the ways that RTS Orchards water levels have. So this transfer, it's only for 60 acre feet one time, but it will be moving some of the production from an area with relatively stable water levels to an area that's having increasing water levels from the water bank recharge. So with this in mind, and also because it's not new production, we're just moving production from one area to another, Todd Groundwater considers material injury as defined in the judgment to be negligible. And the advisory committee reviewed this and they unanimously recommended it.
Thank you, Arden. Is there any discussion? Any questions of Arden?
Nope.
Mr. Chairman, I'll need to recuse myself on this vote.
Okay, Brandon will recuse himself. And is Angelica available to sit in on this vote?
I am available.
Great. So is there a motion to approve resolution number R2257?
May I ask, before we vote on this, why did Mr. Calandri recuse himself?
Adam, I don't,
And business partners with RTS Orchards.
Okay, thank you.
thank you, Adam. Thank you, Brandon. Is there a motion to approve resolution number R2257?
This is Adam. I move that we approve resolution R 22-57.
Motion made by Adam. Is there a second?
Kathy seconds that.
Second by Kathy. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing no discussion, all in favor of approving of the motion to approve resolution number R2257 by roll call vote.
Director McLaren,
Yes.
Director Ariki,
Yes.
Director Martin,
Yes.
Director Urasic,
Yes.
Director Paris.
Yes. Motion's carried unanimously. That brings us to item 12, consideration possible action on small pumper qualifying application. That's going to be by the administrator. Who wants to take that item?
Rob, I'll go ahead and take this item. This
Thank
is
you,
Angel.
Thanks.
Okay, so there is one small pumper qualifying application on this month's agenda. The application starts on page 79 of your agenda packet. The applicants are Leslie and Cesar Castro, and the property is located in the Central Antelope sub-area. The applicants provided small pumper qualifying documentation for a well that they drilled in 2007 to supply domestic water to their future home. The applicant is now moving forward with the construction of this home and wishes to utilize the well. The documentation provided is complete and meets the qualifications to be a small pumper parcel, and the advisory committee and staff recommend approval of this application. Does anybody have any questions?
Angel, since the well was drilled in 2007, did they submit the permit for the well drilling from the county health?
Yes, Adam, they actually provided all the backup documentation for their well permit, their well completion report, their building permits that were all submitted in 2007.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Angel. Any other questions of Angel? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve resolution number R2258?
And the amount of water, did I miss that? Is it, how much did you say, Andrew?
Yeah, Adam, as a small pumper, they're allowed to pump less than 3 acre-feet of water.
Okay.
Any other questions of Angel?
Motion to approve.
Okay, is that Brandon? Motion to approve?
Yes.
Motion made by Brandon to approve resolution number R2258. Is there a second?
Kathy seconds.
Second by Kathy. Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing no discussion, all in favor of the motion to approve resolution R2258 by roll call vote.
Director McLaren,
Yes.
Director Ariki,
Yes.
Director Calandri,
Yes.
Director Urasic,
Yes.
Director Paris.
Yes. Motion's carried unanimously. That brings us to item 13, discussion on Hallmark Group's proposed consulting services agreement and scope of work for administrative services in amendment number 1. Who's going to take that item?
I can start this off. This is Matt.
Thanks, Matt.
You're welcome. And then Craig Parton can jump in here if they're appropriate. So item number 13 on the agenda is written for only discussion purposes. If you see in the agenda, we have an action item for the Hallmark Consulting Services Agreement following our closed session. So again, this item is to seek input from the public as part of the Hallmark agreement. But I'll give a little background to get the conversation started. As you know, at the last board meeting, the board gave direction to staff and legal counsel to go back and work on an agreement with the Hallmark Group for a 1-year term in the not to exceed amount of $165,000 for that first year. So included in your board packet, again on page 100, is the proposed agreement drafted by Craig and Cameron. It was reviewed with Hallmark, and they're acceptable to the terms in the agreement. Again, it's for 1 year beginning January 1st, through December 31st of 2023. And we thought it'd be good to align Hallmark's agreement with the calendar year budget for the Watermaster. Attached to the agreement is their fee schedule on Exhibit B. Exhibit C is the insurance requirements. And then obviously Exhibit A is the detailed scope of work and estimated monthly hours proposed by Hallmark to stay within the $165,000 budget. Also, we worked with Hallmark on drafting amendment number 1 to this agreement, and we thought it'd be a good idea to start the transition period and shadowing of the existing admin staff for the remaining months of calendar year 2022. We have a little bit of budget left for the admin services for the current budget year. We had $150,000 budgeted, but it looks like Palmdale and AVAC will come in under that at roughly $110,000. So amendment number 1 is not to exceed $20,000 for Hallmark to, again, shadow the current admin staff and start the transition period. So hopefully they can hit the ground running come January 1st. So that's a little background of where we're at, unless Craig would like to add anything to that.
I'll just add to remind the board, this is a 1-year agreement. There's a not to exceed price, a scope of work, indemnification from Hallmark in favor of the Watermaster. And it's been provided for comment, I believe, to the advisory committee. And it sounds like there was no particular comment on it, at least in the minutes. And you might have mentioned, Matt, I didn't catch it, whether the admin committee did look at it, which it did, Adam and Derek. So there's some familiarity with the terms, but we're happy to hear what the public has to say and any comments from anyone on this.
Yeah, this is Rob. I have 2 comments from the AVAC board. One is for the hourly rate, and I see that on page 109, Exhibit B, the hourly rate would not be increased unless it was approved by the board or by our board during this contract. Is that correct?
Yes.
And the not to exceed is a number that this consulting group will work within so that we can meet our budget. Is that correct?
That's certainly the intention.
Okay. And then the final thing is our board brought up that they felt the travel expenses should be discounted because they're not actually doing work, or they're able to do more work as they're traveling for other customers. Has that been brought up, and is that something that could be put into this contract?
Matt, you may have a comment on it. I'll just note I don't believe there was discussion about discounting the expenses, but there may have been. Just keep in mind there's a not to exceed number in this contract, which they can't.
So I know in other consulting contracts that I'm involved in, that oftentimes the consultant charges a half of their hourly rate for their actual travel, and then obviously reimbursement for all their actual travel costs. Is that something that can be discussed with the Hallmark Group?
I'll just say from legal counsel's side, we can certainly negotiate whatever the board directs us to do. The something to keep in mind is we wanted to start the amendment number 1 to the agreement on October 1st and get them going and shadowing staff and getting up to speed. And there may take we may not have an agreement if we have additional conditions that we need to negotiate after this meeting.
Would we be able to go forward with Amendment 1 and if it's our board's pleasure, negotiate a little bit more on the final contract that starts January 1?
My sense is they're open to discussion. I don't know what their reaction would be to having renegotiation of that issue. And we can certainly raise it, and the only problem is we won't have a final agreement for approval of the board before October 1st, so we won't have a contract for them to work under.
So are you saying that we need the contract approved before October 1st in order to approve the amendment also? Is that what I'm understanding?
That would be what I would expect their position to be. We haven't had the talk with them about changes to the agreement. But that's certainly, if there's other issues that the board directs us to negotiate, we'll do so, try to do it as quickly as possible. Certainly to have it in shape for the next board meeting. But I just can't assure that they would start October 1st if they didn't have a final meeting of the minds on an agreement before that time.
Okay, and I know we're now crossing over into discussion of the contract itself, so I'll save my further comments for the closed session. Directors, any other comments or questions?
No, the only thing I like the idea that Director Paris is bringing up about the travel time. I wanted to know, and maybe we don't know the answer to this question, is it customary to ask of a consultant to discount their travel time?
I don't know that it's customary one way or the other.
Okay.
It's certainly fair game for negotiation. There's nothing prohibiting discussing and doing that. And each situation, in my experience, can be different depending on the other items in the contract.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Okay, we'll move on to, and there's no action at this time. This would be action in closed session, correct, Craig?
Correct.
Okay, then if there are no more questions, any questions from the public?
Or comments?
Or comments? Hearing none, now we'll move on to item 14, Administrator's Report. Matt or Pete?
Yes, good morning, this is Matt again. So only thing I have to update the board on is we're in the thick of it of working on the 2023 draft budget for the Watermaster. Our plan is to present that to the admin committee, the administrative committee, and the board at the October meeting. So that is the plan, and that's the only thing I have to update at this time, unless you have any questions.
This is Rob. Just a question. It's the intent to keep our 2023 budget within the $5 assessment. Is that correct?
Yes, that's the goal we're working on, and the assumption is to keep that at $5 for 2023.
Okay, great. Any other questions of Matt?
Nope.
This is Derek. I have one. I didn't know to bring it here or to the board members, additional agenda items. But I think just for administration, I got a bit confused this morning looking at the agenda last night and then getting into this. It states that this is a teleconference meeting only. I know we've had here recently, we've gotten back in a quasi public setting. And so I with administration and working with Rob and the board of making sure we have clarity upon that. So I think we all said as soon as we came out of the regulations that were being we were held to and lived up to, that we would be able to get back in person. And I see myself and Brandon and staff here in an empty room, and I look forward to that time of everybody being able to get back in there if they choose.
All right.
I'll come Director Urosik by lunch.
Adam, I'd love to see your face, and you got it. I'll buy you lunch.
I'll cover the tip.
Well, I'll probably apologize for the confusion. In future agendas, if we're still approving the resolution allowed by state law, maybe we'll have it written as a hybrid meeting. So either teleconference or in person.
Great. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Matt.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you for that comment, Derek. Any other comments regarding the administrator's report? If none, then we're on item 15, Watermaster Engineer's report.
Yes, good morning again. It's Phyllis Stanton with Todd Groundwater, and for my report, I have two brief items. The first of which is an update of the table that we provide every time for our board meetings for new production and qualified small pumpers, and that table is on page 126 of your packet. It's exactly the same as presented in the August board meeting, with the exception of the additional 3 acre-feet a year that was approved for new production. So I'm happy to take any questions on that table if you have any. Okay, hearing no questions on that, I'd like to move to...
There's an observation, Phyllis,
Yes.
Adam here. I'm noticing, between 2018 and 2022, the total we've approved obviously is going down and down and down. So in 2022, we only approved 6 acre-feet for small pumpers.
So that's the amount of water associated with each of the small pumpers, which is on this table, I think 3 acre-feet a year. So that means that there were 2 approved so far, and that will be updated next time with 3 that you just approved today.
So for the entire year, potentially would be
right.
3 for a total of 9 acre-feet.
Yeah, we have a couple more months in the year, but yes, that sounds right.
All right. Yeah, I just wanted to point that out to the directors, because in 2018, we approved 126 acre-feet. So
we did.
Yeah. So maybe in 2023 we'll be all done with this.
I think they'll continue to trickle in. In 2018, that was when we were first starting the program, and there were a lot of realtors, especially in the southeast portion of the basin, that were, sort of making sure that their neighborhoods knew about the program and that they got, in on the small pumper list. So, I think it was a lot more when we first started.
All right. Thanks.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Okay, so I'd like to move now to a brief presentation. It's going to be very quick this morning for an update of our work on a Watermaster model. And I've provided just a little verbal 2-sentence update in the past, and I mentioned in the August board meeting that the board might like to hear something substantial, in particular, hear something from the person that is leading the modeling effort, Mike Maley. So we have him this morning. And if I can share the screen and take it away from Angel here, I'm going to pop up a very brief PowerPoint presentation. And Mike and I are going to walk through the material very quickly so that you will have a better understanding of what we're doing and why, just as a reminder, and give you the opportunity to ask us any questions that you might have. So I'm going to start us off. And just as a reminder, we are developing a numerical model for our purposes, assisting the Antelope Valley adjudication efforts. And we started that process in earnest this year. And it's a phased approach, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about. But we wanted to bring you up to speed on where we were and also give you a sort of heads up that there's going to be a data request for some of you going forward. So we wanted to make sure that we got that onto your attention. So just as a reminder, why are we doing this? So a numerical model has a variety of applications, as you can imagine. But for this particular project, there are some obligations in the judgment for the Watermaster engineer. In particular, we are responsible for doing material injury analyses and monitoring safe yield components. And those are pretty broad obligations under the judgment. And the modeling tool certainly is not needed to do I think what would be a minimal level of effort, which we've been doing since we came on board in 2017. But the model gives us a much better opportunity to do it in a more consistent manner, and I think it's going to be more important as we go forward. For the material injury analysis, you had an examples of that this morning where we looked at a new production application for a single-family home, 1.5 acre feet with a minimal amount of water and a replacement water assessment associated with it. So those are relatively straightforward, and I don't see the model as being particularly helpful with respect to that type of a material and injury analysis going forward. It's not necessary.
Recording in progress.
But one of the things that we have been asked by parties in the past is, how does this look cumulatively? What's going on with respect to the new production overall? And I think the board would like to keep up with where new production is being approved and why, and how cumulatively it's going to have an impact on the basin, if it is. So far, we don't have a very large amount of new production approved, but as we go forward, these will be more and more, these questions will be more and more important. Monitoring of safe yield components really is where I think the model is going to be applied ultimately and help us the most. We have metered production now mostly over most of the basin, and we do have production being monitored in that respect. But there are a variety of other components of the water budget that affect the safe yield process, and that's not being monitored directly. And in particular, we are looking to better understand and monitor the impacts from natural recharge coming into the basin, both mountain front, stream flow runoff, and additional managed recharge in the basin, such as the storage that's going on in the bankings and the banking projects, as well as wastewater discharge and other components. So you can get the understanding that there's really a really nice method of keeping up with the components of the safe yield and components of the water budget with the model. And the model gives us a physical representation of how all those components work together. It'll be a nice check that we can do annually and back up the change in groundwater and storage that we've been showing in the annual reports every year that's done sort of manually with water level contours. And this gives us another check on the water budget components in the basin. To sort of outline the model objectives that we have for putting the model together, I just have this little bit of a laundry list here to just give you an idea of how many things are going to be helped with application of a numerical modeling tool. I mentioned the material injury analysis, especially a cumulative analysis already. That's underway. A change in groundwater and storage for the annual reporting process. The model also gives us an opportunity to keep up with inelastic land subsidence, especially in critical areas of the basin when we know we have historical subsidence. We want to use the model for a calculation of basin storage capacity. This is something that can be pulled from the model and can assist us in some of the questions that we might have going forward, such as do we have room in the basin, or where best in the basin should we be able to manage some of the groundwater and storage. And then I mentioned also the recharge component with respect to streamflow runoff into the basin, as well as managed recharge. The locations and timing, of course, are very important for that. And then, overall, this provides a really improved basin understanding. Whenever you try to model the physical system and you come up with answers, whether they match what you see or not, this gives you the opportunity to better calibrate and understand why things are happening in the basin and what things are affecting other things in that physical system. I always remember Larry Rotman. I know many of you knew Larry and when he was heavily involved in the advisory committee. And one of the things that Larry always reminded me over and over again is that you're treating this basin like a bathtub, and you're not looking at this multiple aquifer system. We have very different systems in our upper and lower aquifer in many portions of the basin. And without a numerical modeling tool, it's very difficult to be able to better understand and quantify that. So shout out to Larry for that advice and guidance that he provided, and the model will give us a better understanding of that multiple aquifer system within the subbasin. As many of you may remember, we're doing this on a phased approach. We wanted to make best use of available tools and data that were already existing in the subbasin, and that means incorporation of the USGS ModFlow model, which really was a very long-term, well-researched model that was developed by the USGS. It provides some understanding of the structure in the subbasin. It's a multiple aquifer system model, and it gives us the opportunity to have a beginning here, not to have to do everything from scratch. The process that Mike has been going through now has been examining that model structure, the modules, the files, the data, how the model works, how everything is put together in there, and modifying quite a bit of that as well with some of the information, not only from the judgment, but from the subbasin that we're aware of as far as updating information and then testing. So he's been going through a variety of modify, update, test, and that process is continuing. He's going to talk about that in just a second. We will be evaluating that model performance and identifying any issues that need to be addressed for the remainder of this year, which we're doing right now. We actually thought we would have some preliminary results to share with you, but Mike found some bugs that needed to be fixed in the return flows component of the model. And so this just is an example of sort of what we're doing, looking under the hood and testing all of the details of the model to make sure it's going to be appropriate for the applications that we're planning to use. So for this year, we are putting together also a future scenario for material injury analysis in the future. In other words, setting the model up to be able to run forward and using some of the tools that USGS had for evaluating future scenarios. We are looking to have the model ready for evaluating change in groundwater and storage for the next annual report, and that's in early 2023 that we'll begin to get everything together for that. And then over time, we're going to be improving the water budget, including natural recharge. There are a variety of components, modules that can be brought in to this ModFlow model to assist us with some of those stream flow runoff numbers and mountain front recharge numbers that we need to update in the model. And that's going to be sort of that next phase of work after we get the water budgets, in for changing groundwater and storage. Annual update of the model going forward. So that's the overall approach and application of everything. And I'm going to ask Mike to step in now and talk to us a little bit more about the meat of the model and the activities that he's doing now. So, Mike, if you're available, take it away.
Okay, thanks, Phyllis. Yeah, I'm Mike Maley, Pod Groundwater. So I'm going to just get a little bit more details of kind of some of the stuff that Phyllis outlined in there. To start the model development approach, as Bill's talked about, we are going to use the existing USGS models, mainly the physical structure and the domain. That we're not going to try and redo the geology. We're going to focus on the water budget, but it provides us with an existing structure, and we'll start with that for this phase of the modeling. Our main thing is to get the data and maintain consistency with the previous work. A lot of that is really with the adjudication, all the expert reports and things that were done with that we're providing that in and updating it with current data following those same formats. And we're looking at both the USGS and the geoscience model, the two pre-existing models, as sort of a way to inform or a comparison. So we are going to build the model up from the data sets, the original ones, and have those as a check on us that we're being consistent. And then we also look at identifying potential issues to address in the future. And so I put this figure here on the right. So the three colors, the blue color is the DWR Bulletin 118 groundwater basin. Then you have the black outline, which is the adjudicated area, which is slightly smaller than the DWR basin. And then the USGS model that, again, was also used by geoscience, that is really the red outline. So it is within that area. So it misses some of those fringe areas, which is unfortunate, but I think we're decided that it's best to kind of move forward with this and get our data together. And that might be something that we could address in the future of taking that out and incorporating the rest of the basin. That will take a fair amount of work of getting the geological characterization in that. For now, we're really focusing on getting the water budget pieces of that. Next slide.
Sorry.
Okay.
There we go.
There you go. Thanks. Our main piece of this is to maintain, or this first phase is maintain consistent data methodology, so that we're updating the model with data and following procedures that are consistent with what was done for the adjudication. To do that, we are going back and kind of rebuilding the historical model. We're not revisiting the historical data. We're really just to have that. Now's the time so that we have that information and can be able to use it. And also, it's a method to kind of verify that we are maintaining a consistency with what was done, now over 10, 15 years ago, but maintaining that methodology and approach as that is built into the judgment. And we're also using the existing models, the USGS and geoscience, as sort of checks and looking at their methodology and making sure we're maintaining a consistent approach. But we are, like I said, building up from the data, primarily going back to the expert reports for all the information and getting that in there. And then also the other one is to import the current data. So everything that we've been doing since 2016, the meter pumping, artificial recharge, and return flows. And again, it's just so that when we approach this information, we're doing that in a consistent manner. The picture on the right, again, is kind of showing that model outline, and you can see the majority of all the pumping and everything is within here. I did a quick calculation. It's about maybe 2% of the pumping looks to be maybe outside of that, which is unfortunate, but I think that's still going to give us a useful tool moving forward that we can continue to build upon. Next slide. Model status, kind of what Phyllis described. Again, we're in the process really now of validating that. We have the model up and going. We're comparing it to the other ones, working out data issues. I had hoped that we'd be able to give you some preliminary results. Didn't quite get there, but we are getting very close now. But again, validating the input to the previous reports and models and reports. We're evaluating the model calibration, and then we're going to assess the simulated change in storage to the previous work and the annual reports, and seeing that everything's consistent. So we really want to make sure that we're building this thing up and that it is based on all that previous work and incorporates that. That's been our big emphasis on work to date. We're also looking at building what will be a future case for material injury. As Phyllis mentioned, this model, as it's constructed now, will be best looking at things both either regional or long-term. That's where its real strength will be. It's not going to be as strong looking at local or short-term issues. But those are really the ones that we've had trouble answering. So we'll kind of fill that gap and approach for that. We do want to get the historical model finalized so that future case is based on it. We'll put in the future conditions, and we're finalizing an approach for what that base case material injury for regional approach would be. So that's what we're working on, or getting where we're getting to now. And then the next slide, and kind of end with this. Upcoming, what we want to do is really finish the model setup with data through 2021. And again, finish that work of evaluating the calibration and the water budgets, and then move on and finish the development of that future case scenario. Phyllis mentioned we've been looking at potentially asking for a data request. In this approach we're doing, we have, by going the historical, the expert reports really went up to 2009, and then the Watermaster starts in 2015. So we have a gap in there, 2010 to 2015. And if there were, we were considering that we should probably ask and get information, at least that is available for that period in there. Because now is really the right time to get that and kind of have that whole period up to as best as we can. And then the other one is defining discussions on defining the future material injury base case. So we'll come up with an initial base case, and that probably be a point of discussion of the pumping and recharge assumptions. Things like how do we address, or how should we address groundwater banking in there, and then identify potential material injury analysis scenarios. That's really so that we can make sure that we build it, and we build kind of the data infrastructure so that we can pull that data out of the model to address those questions efficiently.
So Mike, you're saying that there is a gap between 2010 and 2015.
Yeah.
You're using geoscience model, right?
I am. Well, we have those.
Well, I thought they updated the model all the way till 2015.
They updated the model through either 2011 or 2012, and then they kind of made assumptions for moving forward. So they have assumptions, which we could rely on those. One of the things we have with the geoscience model is that we just got the model files, and when you do mod flow in here, some things will get multiple data sets will get merged into a single input file, and without that background information, trying to pull that apart. That's kind of why we went back and decided to go back and kind of rebuild it. So we do have some. I know in kind of looking at what they have, or just kind of reading through the testimony that was in there, they kind of claim they went up, I think, 2011 or 2012 with pumping. I'm not quite as sure on some of the others. But it does seem that at least from 2013 to 2015, they used the same data.
So what data Okay, so assuming that's the case, which sounds like it is, that they made assumptions. What data are you using to update the model? Are you relying on the USGS?
Right now, we're kind of using the geoscience assumptions to kind of bridge the gap for now, just to kind of get it working, because we're not really, trying to get, we're not trying to redo the past. We're just trying to make that consistent.
Sure.
But it's like, well, since we're here, we probably should do it. And we're anticipating that probably the main one would be the urban pumping, because those we tend to have the records for that. If there's larger pumping. And then if there were any, I know some of those groundwater banks were coming online, and they may have been doing some either initial pieces or pilot testing or something else that maybe you want to be incorporated.
Do you have access to the water levels that are USGS?
We have water level data through that period. That is true.
Through what period?
Over the gap period. We have water level data for really the whole historical period.
All the way to 2021, right?
Yeah, because the USGS has that, and that's available publicly.
In your judgment, now that you're playing with the model, do you believe that the location of the wells that the USGS is monitoring, and the Watermaster, by the way, is paying a big chunk of their cost, together with other partners, do you believe the location of these wells are good or should be modified to help us refine this model going forward? To reflect, obviously, the whole idea of all this is we want to reflect accurate conditions of the groundwater basin going forward.
Well, I'll give an initial answer and say I believe that we do have a nice distribution. There's water level data in all different parts of the basin, which and in many basins that's not the case. It's just you have a few areas with very clustered information and areas without any. So at least we have that. I think as we get through here and finalize it, that would be a good question. We'll kind of look at that in more specific and see if there are any kind of local areas that maybe we go. And that would kind of come out of the calibration of, well, this seems kind of, unusual, or that response isn't, we're not getting that. Maybe we need more information there. But overall, it at least is a good comprehensive data set that gives pretty, I guess, consistent regional coverage. So in that sense, it is very good.
Yeah, and I'll also add, Mike, Adam, it's really fortunate, I think, that we picked up the USGS CASGEM program, because they were continuing to monitor wells that had been used in the calibration of this model. So if you look at the water levels that were actually used by USGS to calibrate, those wells are the wells that are still being monitored for the most part. So
correct.
I think I think we have such a good, lucky historical data set. And Mike's absolutely right. There will always be local conditions that will identify themselves, and that's another great application of the model, is to better understand what's not working in one particular area, and where we might need additional information.
Understood. So now, one last thing, Mike, how are you accessing this water level data? Is there a site that you go to and you download the monitoring data instantaneously, or do you have to go through USGS staff in San Diego, or how do you do that?
Well, not to be flippant, but I asked Kate for it, or Arden. So I'm assuming they're getting it from those public sources. I didn't do it. I asked for it, and they go, here it is.
Okay.
Do you have that? I don't. I'm not.
I recall once or twice looked at the data, and I think they have website where you can get all the hydrographs and the monitoring. I was just wondering, because as you know, every time you try to get something from the USGS, it's a lot of legwork. So that's really the premise of my question, because if there is anything that the Watermaster or even LA County Water Works District 40 need to facilitate for you through the Watermaster, would be glad to do so. But it doesn't sound like it. It sounds like you're able to get all the well data with no issue.
I know
it's all
been in the annual report and updated, so I assume you have that worked out.
Cool.
We do. We have a very comprehensive database ourselves internally. We download everything from USGS, and it is available online. They've been very helpful to us,
Yes.
and so yeah, we do get it.
Perfect. Thank you. So I assume going forward, we will always update the model with the new data, whether it's every year or every 3 years or whatever the frequency is needed, right? Tell us.
Correct. Yeah, we will get that and then kind of do that typical process. Just at first you get it, add the data, look at it, see if how the calibration is working. If you see it starting to drift, then that's maybe an indication that it's time to get under the hood and start maybe making some model modifications. But usually those things they carry forward and then we can continue to use it for the different applications.
And one last question, and this is for both of you fellas and Mike. Is there a need in the, groundwater basin Napa is the third largest groundwater basin in the state. It's a huge basin. Is there a need for key wells, or should we identify a few key wells within the sub areas that maybe they will add more value to the model going forward?
I hadn't thought about, we certainly pull out the best data that's representative into hydrographs for each area, and we do that every year in the annual report. And we did a very systematic analysis of the historical data sets for the water levels. We made hundreds of hydrographs in order to identify sort of the longest records, the best data, and the best representative of a certain area. So in some ways, we've already identified the key wells with our hydrograph analysis that's in every annual report. And that's a nice subset of the data that we have in the database and downloaded from USGS as well.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so thanks very much, Mike, and thanks for your questions, Adam. Appreciate that very much. That's the end of the presentation. Again, we were hoping that we would actually have, I'm going to stop sharing my screen here. We were hoping to actually have some results today, and we're very close. Mike's running the model consistently now, and we just didn't want to show something that we knew already had a bug in it. But this process that we're going back and forth in right now is, the sort of painful first steps that every model has with respect to data, et cetera. But we will be probably, once Mike gets everything identified that we really want to, better represent in the model, we will be coming back to the group with a data request. I know that there's good information on production data during the gap years because many of the allocations were actually based on that historical period. I think it was a period of 3 years or so. And I know that parties have advised us that a lot of that material is in the GlowTrans. And respectfully, we have looked at that, and it's just not in a clean summary table anywhere. I mean, there's just, as you know, thousands and thousands of pages. And so we just thought it might be more efficient if we came back and asked for just a series of data for, it would probably be urban production, it would be wastewater discharge, and a couple of other key items that others may have already just at their fingertips that we could improve the model. And as Mike says, now's the time just to go ahead and get as much of the QC data into the model that we can. So we don't have the list for you today, but we will be doing that, and you'll probably be getting emails in the coming months. And I wanted to just let you know that that's why.
Fellas, when the model is all fully calibrated and you're comfortable with it, will you demonstrate to the board an application of, like, let's say, an injury analysis or something, so that the board can visually see how the model being used in a beneficial fashion.
Yes, of course, and thank you for asking that, Adam. We really wanted something like that today, and we came so close. But
That's
we,
okay.
you had asked us that you'd like to get an update of our progress on a monthly basis, and I'll continue to provide a verbal report as soon as we have even preliminary information, because I think, in a lot of ways, the parties that have been involved in this for so many years know a lot about, specific local areas of the basin. And so you may look at a map that we've generated and you can say, oh, that looks strange in that area. I would have expected X to have looked like that instead of Y. And that's great information for us. So this is going to be a working model, and we anticipate having short sessions with the board as often as the agenda can allow it, to keep everybody informed on what's happening.
Understood. Thank you.
Thank you.
Phyllis, this is Brandon. One resource that you may or may not be aware of, LA County Sanitation Districts 14 and 20 has several monitoring wells on the east side. They've been monitoring, especially those gap years. That might be a good resource for you guys to help put things together.
Thank you so much, Brandon. I appreciate you saying that. We have really appreciated LA County San's efforts. When they had those monitoring wells approved, they provided information to us, and they have been so generous with sharing their data with us every year for the annual report. So yeah, that's a great comment. The monitoring wells in the basin are huge, and we do try to track them. So thanks again.
Okay, are there any other questions of Mike or Phyllis? Hearing none. Phyllis and Mike, outstanding presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. And we'll move on to item 16, General Counsel's report. Craig?
Yes, a couple of topics. One is the status of enforcement matters in general, the court proceedings. We have 3 active court proceedings that are subject to closed session discussion, but there are some developments in those that I will review with the board. October 25th and 26th, we have hearings scheduled before Judge Komar in the three matters that are in closed session. But there'll be further report on that. Obviously, perhaps some statements that can be made publicly if there's a public resolution of any of the matters, either by the 25th or shortly thereafter. If you look at the aging account receivables on page 14 and 15, you'll see that we've identified or engaged with 5 of the entities that are on those 2 pages. There's still some that we have not engaged with that the board may want to take a closer look at and direct that at least contact be made and a demand letter be sent. But we have the 3 that are subject to the closed session, and also Wilsonia is subject to a settlement agreement already and payment plan, and Tapia is essentially resolved, though there's an outstanding amount that's subject to a lien on real property that we put on last month. So we're taking seriously the AR situation. The board may have some information or interest in having us pursue others. I'm trying to keep the amount of court activity relatively immune from becoming out of control by staging the entities that we want to bring enforcement actions against kind of in a row. We started with Phelan, we've gone through Tapia, we have the 3 pending matters, we have a court hearing date on the 25th and 26th, as to all three of those, which is the result being that we'll have more bandwidth to take on additional entities on that aging account receivable in the next couple of months. But that's what I can tell you in open session about where we are on enforcement and the pending public hearing dates that are scheduled. I also wanted to bring to the board's attention a memo that came to you separately, I believe on Friday, from Patty. That is a memo, a one-page memo that relates to the Estradas. You might recall at the last board meeting in August, the Estradas brought a new production application to produce for domestic use 1.5 acre feet. They had previously gotten approval from the Watermaster in 2020 to drill a well in a separate parcel of theirs, and they ran into trouble with that. They have two adjoining parcels. They're Willis class members, and the question from the board was whether that was appropriate, whether they could indeed submit an application for a new production for each parcel that are in common ownership, but they're separate parcels. And can they associated with the approval of the application last month? So that's, in my view, a clear road for them to go forward. I believe they were approved last month anyway, but it was subject to reviewing it by council, and that memo was produced as a result. So those are the two general topics, enforcement and the Estrada matter. I'll leave the rest details for closed session on the pending court matters that are subject to litigation.
Thank you, Craig. Any questions of Craig? And Angel just confirming that the Estrada matter is taken care of and everything's been approved and they understand that now?
Yes.
Great.
Yes, Rob, that's correct.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Okay, that brings us to item 17, board members' requests for future agenda items. Any requests for future agenda items?
Not at this moment.
Okay, and before we go on, yes, go ahead, please.
This is Brandon. It was brought to my attention that we may have a pumping issue on the former Catavar Ranch. I'm not sure how to proceed with this information, but I did drive out there personally today. From a farming standpoint, it does look as if there is irrigation going on out there. It is my understanding that the Catavar Ranch does not have any production rights nor a application of any sorts in. I'd like us to be able to examine that at the next board meeting and possibly take an action item to send them a reminder that where they stand and what they're doing is outside of the adjudication, if in fact it is happening.
Brandon, that'd be fine. We can put the request on the agenda to review at the Catavar.
Can I call you right back? I'm at the board meeting.
Adam, are you?
Yeah, hold on a second. Yeah,
Adam?
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, did you have a question?
No, I'm sorry. I was answering the phone, and that's impolite. I apologize for that.
Oh, no problem. So that, Patty, if you could just put the Catavar Ranch enforcement issue on the agenda and work with Brandon how that will be worded, that would be fine. Any other agenda items?
No.
Okay, hearing none. Was remiss at the beginning of the meeting. I did want to welcome our newest member, Brandon Comandri, to our Watermaster.
That's right.
Report. And it's really a pleasure to have you with us, Brandon, and taking your father's place is a bonus too. So we're very happy to have you and welcome aboard.
That's right.
It's great to be here. I look forward to working with such a great group of people.
Thank you, Brandon.
Welcome, Brandon.
And that brings us to item 18. Brandon, did you want to make a motion for us to go into closed session?
I'm so moved.
Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second that, Kathy.
Motion second by Kathy. Is there any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all in favor of the motion to approve going into closed session by roll call vote.
Director McLaren,
Yes.
Director Ricci,
Yes.
Director Calandri,
Yes.
Director Urosic,
Yes.
and Director Paris.
Yes, motion's carried unanimously, and we will take why don't we take a 5-minute break while we're working on getting into closed session. And looking at the agenda, will probably be 15 minutes to 30 minutes, maybe longer, just for the public to be aware. And so 5-minute break. Let's start back at 11:25.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Directors, please stay on the line and we'll go into closed session for item